I'm the Hornet King, and I removed some incredible and insane wasp nests. Hey everyone, welcome to the Hornet King channel and welcome back to another episode of How Many Yellow Jackets Can I Vacuum Out of Somebody's Home? So this particular client wasn't blessed with one yellow jacket colony, but two yellow jacket colonies separated by about 15 feet of space within the same ceiling space. So when a client contacts me and says, hey, I got yellow jackets flying around inside my house and I'm seeing activity in two different points of my home, where is this nest at? I usually tell them, you don't have one colony, more than likely you have two different colonies. So upon arriving to this client's home, that's exactly what I found. Not only were they two different colonies, they were two completely different species. So the one species was Vespula vulgaris, aka the common yellow jacket, and the other species was this colony here, which was Vespula squamosa, aka the southern yellow jacket. So not only was this a southern yellow jacket colony built inside this cavity space, there was actually another older nest that it was probably from the previous year, and they built right on top of it and kind of to the side of it. So there was a massive amount of nesting material within inside this ceiling space. So cutting out the drywall just so I can access the nest, when I first started investigating, I couldn't really hear them all that well. So I went upstairs and put my ear on the floor, and I could hear them buzzing really, really well through their hardwood floor. So anytime you have like a hard material like wood, you can actually hear a little bit better than when you hear like through like plasterboard. Drywall I can hear pretty well because of the acoustics of the drywall, but for whatever reason this colony I couldn't hear it very well from underneath like in the drywall area. So I started cutting it out and I had gone and guesstimated where the hole should go, and I nailed it and went right up into the nesting material. So cutting out this area, I start with a smaller hole and I get bigger as I locate the nest, and I can assess how big the nest is going to be and how much I can pull out in a smaller hole. If I need to go bigger, I go bigger, because patching drywall, it doesn't matter if you're patching a 4-inch hole or if you're patching a 20-inch hole. The process is virtually the same. So I could tell that this nest was going to be huge trying to come out of this hole. So I just kind of put my hands up in here, and that's like the creepiest part of my job, is sticking my hands into the unknown. I have no idea what I'm touching. I have no idea how much of the colony is in there and going to encase my hand, potentially sting me. So that's the creepiest part. So I just start pulling down some comb and trying to expose as much of the nest as I can. You can notice that there's actually not a heck of a lot of activity flying out as I'm moving those spots around. That's how I knew that most of the colony was probably up in the layers of comb. So now you can start seeing them flying out and crawling out of the crevices in between the layers of comb, but also between the comb and the rafter to the side there. So I get a lot of comments, people asking me what I do when I'm removing a nest inside of somebody's home. Do I tape off the area or use plastic or what have you? And no, I don't actually do that. What I do is I leave curtains open and I allow light coming in from outside, and that way when the yellow jackets leave the cavity space, they fly right to the window or to my lights, and then I just vacuum them up from there. This particular house was a little bit different because since it was kind of like open concept, there were a lot of like big archways, doorways going from one room to the other. There was a lot of light coming from other areas too, so they were flying pretty much between 3 different rooms around this cavity space. So I did have to spend about 35 minutes to 45 minutes vacuuming up wasps at the very end, which you'll see. I show a little bit of that because people often ask, and I usually don't include those in my videos, but I get a lot of comments asking about that, so I wanted to include that in this video. So I pulled out the majority of the nest here, but I know that there's still a lot of envelope and there's still a lot of activity within the space itself. So I just take the vacuum and vacuum up a lot of the envelope. But there was a heck of a lot of envelope in this particular cavity, so I actually started pulling it out and throwing it in the Rubbermaid bin instead of just vacuuming it up all at the same time. This is a good example too, since this is the end of the season. People often ask in clients or comments will often ask, where do the queens go when they leave the nest? Well, most of the time, they just kind of like, it's almost like a bomb goes off. They just kind of leave in a 360-degree radius around the nest. They don't go back out the original entranceway that the workers had been using all season. They'll just climb into any cavity that they can to hunker down and wait for the following season to re-emerge. So this is a prime example that you can see of that. You can see queens climbing all around the rafters and things. I'm trying to vacuum them up so that way the client doesn't have a problem the following year. Look at all this envelope I'm pulling out. I mean, that is a ton of envelope. Look at all that, just coming out in handfuls. And some of that is old nests too, so it's not just all this particular colony. So vacuuming this out, and oops! Change of position. Wasn't that convenient? I actually knocked the camera off the top of the ladder and it landed like facing straight up, which is pretty funny if you ask me. So I left that in there. And just cleaning everything up. Of course, now you get a great shot of my face because the camera's been laying on the floor this whole time. But just trying to sweep up the floor and get all the envelope off and any adults that landed on the ground too. And just vacuum everything up, and you can see my Rubbermaid bin is just heaping with nest material. So putting the lid on, just kind of to smush it down a little bit, but I got everything trapped in there, and it's ready to be taken home. However, I got one more nest to remove, so didn't bother cleaning up too many of the adults flying around, because there's no sense in worrying about them right now, because another colony is going to be being released into the space as well. So just do it all at the same time. I wish I worked this fast. It takes me a little bit of time to go around and vacuum up every little morsel off the ground, so I wish I worked in super speed like that. So here you can see some of the ones flying up and kind of caking to the top of the light here. I don't know what it is about these kind of lights. Any kind of like dome-based lights or ceiling fans, they love to just kind of cake around those spots. So this is nest number 2. This is Vespula vulgaris. Now they're one of the more aggressive species that I deal with. As far as cavity nest building species are concerned. And you kind of can tell when I start pulling these out, there are just a ton of yellow jacket adults inside of this nest. They were just, I mean, they were engulfing my hands, they were flying all over me, they were latching on to me. Southern yellow jackets are known to be my latchers. They're the ones who latch on me the most. But vulgaris is another one that will latch on and kind of like stay attached to me when I'm removing them. They're also one of the other few colonies I have around here in PA that will build crazy amounts of envelope. German yellow jackets kind of have the cake on that. They put a lot of envelope on their nests, but vulgaris is a pretty close second. And look at the colony in this thing. I mean, I wish I could have gotten a little bit better shots with my camera, but holding a flashlight and a camera at the same time and trying to get the shots while also looking at the nest and seeing what you're doing is really, really difficult. So I apologize for the shaky camera work here, but I still wanted to show you guys this colony and show you this removal because this was a heck of a lot of adults inside of here. And you can even see like the girth of the nest. Like, look at all that of activity in there. I mean, that is just a lot of adults flying around. So our buddies, the German yellow jackets, they kind of just float around. They don't really care about me being around there. But man, this particular species, man, you even just open up the cavity space and they're just lunging at you and latching on and trying to get you, trying to get a piece of me any way that they can. So unfortunately, I did have to make this hole a little bit bigger. That way I could get the nest out in one piece. Folks often ask why I don't just keep them all, just take it apart piece by piece. inside the cavity. That way I can mitigate the size of the hole. Well, the thing is, once I start cracking open the layers of comb, that's releasing a ton more yellow jackets into the space and into the house. Into the house isn't such a big deal because I can vacuum them up, but if I release them into the space more, then that's potentially new queens and things that could be venturing into the cavity space and starting a new nest next year, and I really don't want to have that happen. So getting the nest down in one piece, it keeps all the layers together, and it keeps any adults that are within the layers, keeps them trapped in there, and they won't fly out and try to escape. And it's funny too, because folks often ask, like, what do I do with the contents in the vacuum, and about the live yellow jackets inside the vacuum, and how crazy that must be to empty that, and blah blah blah. For those of you who've been here for a long time, you know that this is how I do it. But I put a little bit of water in the vacuum canister, and I put a couple drops of Dawn dish soap in there, or any kind of dish soap, doesn't matter. It could be Ajax, could be dollar store, doesn't matter. But I put a couple drops of dish soap in there, and that kills the yellow jackets. If they don't die from the inertia of being sucked up and hitting the baffle in the vacuum, then they die pretty quick, getting the soapy water on them. So what I do is I go home and I just dump the dead carcasses and things on my compost pile and just let it biodegrade. So what it looked like to me was that this was the final part of the nest. Like, this was the girth, and all I had to do was just pull this down and pull it out, and I was done. But unbeknownst to me, even though I got the majority of the nest out here and pretty much in one piece, there was still more behind it. And it just never fails. Like, especially this. Like, this was the last removal of the day. I was about an hour away from home, and I just wanted to get it done. I was just ready to get it out of there so I could be done for the day. And once I pulled this thing out, I was like, okay, here we go. We're almost there, light at the end of the tunnel. And I pulled this thing out, and I could still see comb up inside of there. I was like, God, like, it's just my luck, you know? So even though my gloves are made of leather, and they're pretty much sting resistant, they're not sting proof. So I try to vacuum off the ones on my fingers as I can, because I really don't want them stinging me through the glove. Mainly through the seam, like where the two pieces of leather meet, like at the finger. Their stinger can get in between there, between the stitching, and sting me. It's happened before. I love these angles when I'm pulling nests out, where I have the camera facing up from the top of the ladder, because then you get to really see the whole, like, girth of the nest sliding out of the cavity space. Oh no, buddy. It's a two-hander. Both hands. Look at this thing. And it's just a monstrosity. Look at that. That's crazy. And that's not even all of it. There's more up there yet. And I exclaim here, I'm like, God, you gotta be kidding me. Here we go. Let's look inside of there. Look at that. Look at all that activity. Oh my gosh, there's just so many adults in there. Buzzing around. They're just like, okay, I guess we're just going to hang out here. There's a lot of queens in there. I can see queens right now. There's a lot of queens in there. And they're not queens that are working on the colony for this year. They're queens that had just hatched, and they're going to be getting ready to leave the nest to go and hunker down for the winter time and wait until next spring to start their own colony. They're not going to continue building onto this nest if I miss a couple of queens or whatever. Those queens will probably die in this space. Unless they find a way out. It doesn't look like it, but it was really hard for me to reach my arm in there. So instead of trying to reach in there and pull out all that comb and envelope, I just took the vacuum and just let it just like chop it all up and suck it up. This vacuum has really great suction for doing these types of nests. So if I just take the nozzle and just scrape it on the ceiling or on the rafter, it breaks up the comb and then it just flies right into the canister. So usually by the time I'm done a nest like this, well, these 2 nests, my canister, my vacuum is just like chock full, like packed with envelope and nest material, and of course dead carcasses. So I just go around, like I said, spend about 45 minutes just vacuuming up all the excess adults that have been flying around and caking here to this light fixture. Look at this light fixture. This is a nightmare to have to vacuum up wasps also. Since I left the light on, they were attracted to that light, so I just went around the rooms and started turning off all the lights. So I don't need to see at this point to be able to see the wasps flying around. I can turn off the lights and let them go to the windows then, and then I can just vacuum them right off the windows. There we go, turning off the lights. And now you'll start to see that they'll kind of decluster from that area, and then they'll start flying to the windows. So I went around the client's kitchen. Now I had to do 3 different rooms here and just continue vacuuming up because they were just flying everywhere. So luckily when I was done, there weren't any left. The customer didn't have to worry about there being yellow jackets in their house. I was very, very thorough, and I make sure that I get every last one of them. And never got any complaints from them saying that they found more. So once I get these nests home, I have about probably 5 or 6 bins of yellow jackets nests. I do a lot of removals in one day. So I bring these nests home, and at the very end of the day, I open up the boxes and I start pulling them out. So here's a queen right here that was just kind of sitting on top of this nest. I flick her out, let her go. I'm not too worried about the queens. If they want to start a new nest next year, I'm totally fine with that. I hope they do around my property. There's another queen. And so that way I can film them and observe them. A lot of what I do is scientific. I relocate some colonies here to my house, and I'll study them and study how they build, study what materials they use, study what types of insects that they prey on. It's interesting, too, because my neighbor actually has honeybees, and they're about 2 houses down, and I have yet to have one of my colonies come back with honeybee carcasses. So oftentimes people in the comments will say it's pretty ridiculous that you relocate colonies when you're threatening the honeybee populations. Well, interestingly enough, I have not had any honeybee carcasses in any of my nests. So people will often ask, how do I even know that? Well, when wasps will hunt and prey other insects, they will catch them, they will bring them back to the nest, and they will chew them up. And their exoskeleton usually falls off, their legs fall off, their heads fall off, and they crunch up the meat from inside of the bodies of the insect. And then they feed that to their larvae. The wasps themselves do not eat that meat. They feed that meat to their larvae, and then their larvae will process that material and then regurgitate a digestive fluid, and that's what the adults will eat. So at the bottom of their nests will be all the carcasses of all the bugs that they ate. And not once have I found a honeybee carcass, which is really interesting. I find caterpillar carcasses, grasshoppers, flies, beetles, like Japanese beetles, other yellow jacket, other wasp species, mud daubers. I'll find all kinds of stuff like that. But again, no honeybees. So as usual with these nests, I take my digging trowel and I vacuum them up. And look at all the adults in between these layers of comb. Can you imagine if I was taking these comb apart, taking the layers apart inside the cavity? All of those adults would be flying around inside that cavity, and I'd have to vacuum up that many more in their home. So it's good that I do that here. And you can see that they're kind of sluggish. Since they were in the Rubbermaid bin for about an hour drive, it was warm, and I'm sure that it was slowing them down significantly. Plus the moisture content, since the larvae are constantly regurgitating fluid, that fluid, if it's not dragged away by the adults, gets saturated into the nests. So that's another reason why the adults have to suck the fluid away from the larvae to keep their nest from becoming all saturated with fluid. Come on, turkey. Gobble, gobble, gobble. So at the very, very end of my day, after I take the nests apart, I feed all of the larvae from the nest to my chickens and my turkey. And my squirrel. But you don't get to see Humphrey in this particular one. I don't know where she was, but she didn't come around for feast time right away. So enjoy a little bit of chickens and turkey ASMR from eating wasp larvae. All right, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to check out this video. I appreciate you guys stopping by and watching my videos, and I'll see you on the next one.